My name is Ali El Yassir, and I'm Regional Director for UN Women, covering Europe and Central Asia. Welcome to this event on a critical topic. We're going to be discussing social support policies as a tool for women's empowerment in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. The event is translated into Turkish and will be published in English and Turkish on the Ministry's YouTube channel. Zoom participants can also choose the language they want to listen into using the interpretation option at the bottom of your screen, and that should be a globe that you'll be able to click and choose the language. Before we start, I'd like to use this opportunity to thank the government of Turkey for organizing and hosting this event in the framework of the 65th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. The government of Turkey has consistently and substantively contributed to the CSW every year, not least of all through this session, while COVID-19 is forcing us all to adapt and work differently. I also want to recognize Turkey's support to and partnership with UN Women, not least by hosting the regional office here in Istanbul, the beautiful city where I am based. I also want to thank all of you for joining us today from different parts of the world to take part in this important discussion. Apologies for the delay, and we have a fantastic list of speakers, so I suggest that let us all just dive right in. It is my honor to invite Her Excellency Ms. Zehra Zumrut Seljuk, the Minister of Family, Labor and Social Services of Turkey, to give the welcoming remarks. Her Excellency started working as a senior researcher at the Statistical, Economic and Social Research and Training Center for the Islamic countries under the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and later became the Director of Statistics and Information. She spearheads many projects aimed at sustainable development and programs for capacity building. She's been actively engaged and leads diverse areas of work related to socioeconomic development, related to gender, demography, formal labor, poverty, education, and innovation, banking and finance, and knowledge systems, among many others. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Your Excellency, President of the General Assembly, Honorable Ministers, distinguished participants, I am profoundly pleased to convene with you at the side event organized by Turkey on the occasion of the 65th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, and I welcome you all. First of all, I would like to thank you all for accepting our invitation to this event. We are honored with the presence of His Excellency Volkan Bozkurt, the esteemed President of the 75th session of the UN General Assembly. I believe that we will have an enriched and comprehensive exchange of views today with your valuable contributions. Distinguished participants, as you all know, the reason we are gathering virtually is the COVID-19 outbreak, which has been impacting our lives over the course of the last year. This global health problem has turned out to be the greatest global socioeconomic crisis since the Second World War. So the impact of the pandemic on various sectors and groups has arisen at many levels through the shocks it has caused on the labor market, also on economic figures. We experienced majority of the populations in many countries had to cope with lockdowns and social distancing for months. Workers in certain sectors were subject to higher risk so that they exposed to higher levels of income losses as well. So those with non-standard forms of employment, especially low-skilled and temporary workers, including the migrants and those working in client-facing services, have been more exposed to job losses as well. In fact, women are one of the most severely affected groups of society in many aspects. It is estimated that it is expected to increase the poverty rate for women worldwide, this COVID-19 outbreak. So the pandemic required a rapid and effective response by all countries in a concerted manner. If we work together, we can save lives, restore livelihoods, and move forward together in order to leave no one behind. In Turkey, thanks to the timely taken measures and solid management and existing strong infrastructure to deal with the adverse effects of the pandemic, we were able to curb the rapid spread of the pandemic. I can proudly say that we have become a role model for the world in this struggle, and particularly with the measures we have taken in care homes to protect our elderly citizens, which is the population that the COVID-19 has taken the most lives from in many other countries. As a matter of the fact, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Turkey's most important advantage proved to be our strong health infrastructure and the devoted work of our health personnel. So both public and private sectors have made remarkable investments in health for the last 2 decades. And in line with our universal health coverage system, all healthcare services, including the testing, treatment, and vaccination, are offered free of charge to everyone. So from now and on, we need to focus on the post-pandemic period and address the impact of the outbreak in all its aspects for the empowerment of our women and girls. And another fact is that it is apparent that the COVID-19 will drive the world economy towards a global recession. So IMF expects a significant contraction in global growth in 2020. Meanwhile, ILO estimates that full or partial lockdown measures now affect almost 2.7 billion workers, and this represents nearly 80% of the world's total workforce. So as a result of the closure of the schools and greatly reduced service supply, having dependent or infected family members, domestic responsibilities place extra burden on the shoulders of women. So this fact tells us that the inequalities in terms of care responsibilities will deepen the gap between women and men in terms of labor market access after COVID-19 as well. Women earn less, work in less secure jobs, and are more likely to be employed in the informal sector at the global level. So having this, now please allow me to give you an outlook on our efforts with respect to women's empowerment in Turkey. As the national mechanism for the empowerment of women, our ministry continues its efforts in line with the priorities that have been set for 2023, despite this setback brought by the global health crisis of COVID-19 pandemic. Since the early days of the pandemic, we have been providing social assistance and supports for our citizens under a very comprehensive plan. And the Social Protection Shield program is built upon 4 pillars. These pillars are working life, social security, social services, and social assistance. And under this comprehensive Social Protection Shield program, we have provided a total of 53 billion Turkish liras financial support to more than 16 million beneficiaries. And I would like to especially point out that approximately 65% of our social assistance beneficiaries are women in Turkey. And considering some of the additional risks for women that are posed by the pandemic, we made sure that the needs are met properly. And during the pandemic, we enhanced our financial support system. And then we made sure that by increasing the amount of payment programs that specifically target women's needs, including the conditional benefits for health and also pregnancy, maternity, as well as we provided the cash assistance for widowed women. And we also implemented flexible working arrangements, particularly for women with dependent children, such as remote working. From this fact, we have taken important steps in terms of women's economic empowerment that has become more important with the pandemic. As we consider women's cooperatives as the driving force towards this issue, we have launched significant initiatives to increase their efficiency and also their prevalence. And women's cooperatives with their entrepreneurial capacity create not only economic but also social value, and they ensure the transition from unstable jobs to decent work. And in order to support these mechanisms, we have been organizing regional meetings, and in this way last year we reached nearly 40,000 women through a total of 731 workshops, trainings, and information meetings held in all provinces of Turkey. And we have also supported the establishment of new cooperatives. We have been also organizing financial literacy and women's economic empowerment seminars and successfully reached nearly 500,000 women in Turkey. And we believe that since the world will never be the same again after the COVID-19 pandemic, it is of great importance to find innovative ways to eliminate all these problems and generate solutions while developing our existing policies. Unfortunately, the negative impacts on women and girls have emerged in all walks of life, and among all, violence against women and girls is one of the issues that require urgent intervention and coordinated policies as a priority. The economic and social challenges brought about by the pandemic, together with the limitations in movement, have significantly increased the risk for women and girls subject to violence in almost all countries. The latest statistics by WHO indicate that even before the global spread of COVID-19, 1/3 of women in the world had experienced some form of violence in their lives. As Turkey, we work day and night with no hesitation our principle of zero tolerance for violence during the pandemic as well. We have continued to offer our services by means of violence prevention and monitoring centers in all our provinces and women's shelters. The number of shelters has increased from 11 to 148 nationwide in the last 2 decades. So we also ensure that the children staying with their mothers in shelters continue their education through our national distance education platform that we call as EBA TV. And we continue to provide and monitor our services constantly in coordination with our local units and generate instant solutions for the problems that have arisen. We also deliver distance trainings regularly to enhance the capacities of our personnel and also our directors. And we inform the victims of violence via phone and short message on mechanisms which they may apply in case of exposure to the violence. So considering the possible increase in calls to social support line at the beginning of the pandemic last March, we start a prioritization process and we ensure that women subject to violence could reach the relevant support staff without waiting. And since the beginning, we have been closely working in collaboration with the NGOs and all related actors in combating violence. So esteemed participants, perhaps the most striking lesson we have learned from the pandemic is that we should aim to build more equal, more inclusive, and more sustainable economies and societies. While doing so, we should focus on the methods prescribed by Sustainable Development Goals. As expressed by our Honorable President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, he always said that we possess not only the means, but also all the wisdom and determination to tackle with the pandemic. As Turkey, we have put all our means at the disposal of entire humanity, as well as of our citizens during this difficult period. In this sense, we have provided medical aid and support to more than 150 countries and 12 international organizations. So before concluding my remarks, I would like to underline that as Turkey, we will continue our efforts to improve the status of women, ensure effective participation of women in all walks of life, and provide equal access to rights, resources, and opportunities for women. And especially, I would like to convey my gratitude to His Excellency Volkan Bozkurt, the esteemed President of the 75th session of the UN General Assembly, our moderator, my counterparts, and also all of our panelists, as well as our participants, distinguished audience from all over the world, and those who contributed to the organization of this site event. I hope that next year we will have a face-to-face meetings in New York. So I greet you all with my deepest respect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Excellency Minister, for your very rich, welcoming remarks. And now we have the veritable honor to welcome the President of the UN General Assembly, His Excellency Mr. Volkan Bozkır, to deliver the keynote speech for today's event. Without further introduction, just to highlight that Mr. Bozkır has served as the Foreign Policy Advisor to the Prime Minister, Chief of Cabinet and Chief Foreign Policy Advisor to Turkey's President, Deputy Secretary General and then Secretary General for EU Affairs. Mr. Bozkır has also long served as a Member of Parliament. And as I have witnessed myself both last year at the Beijing +25 event at the General Assembly and also the opening of the Commission on the Status of Women session this year, Mr. Bozkır is a very strong advocate for women's rights. Excellency, The floor is yours.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Sayın Bakanım, I thank the Republic of Turkey and in particular Her Excellency Zehra Zümrüt Selçuk, Minister of Family, Labor and Social Services for the invitation to address this very important event. As the President of the UN General Assembly and a Turkish citizen, it is of course a pleasure for me to be with you all today, even virtually. I'm sure you are aware that one of my priorities as the President of the General Assembly is improving the living standards and rights of women, ensuring their full and equal participation in all spheres of life, and strengthening their status within society. Hence, this occasion and the subject we are discussing today could not be more pertinent. At the beginning of the 75th session of the General Assembly, we commemorated the 25th anniversary of the 4th World Conference on Women with a high-level meeting on accelerating the realization of gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. Despite gains made since 1995, no country has fully addressed all 12 areas of concern outlined in the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. More concerning is the fact that gains made in the 25 years period are under threat from the global COVID-19 pandemic. Over the past year, women have served on the front line of the response to the coronavirus, representing 70% of the global healthcare workforce, 2/3 of the global paid care workforce, and the majority of paid caregivers for the elderly in both facilities and home-based care. Yet the gender pay gap in the health sector stands at 28%, substantially higher than the overall gender pay gap of 16%. Furthermore, many women have sacrificed their health for economic security. Women in the front lines of healthcare are in particularly close and prolonged contact with COVID-19 patients. Globally, infection rates among female healthcare workers are up to 3 times higher than among their male counterparts. Today, I urge all member states to guarantee protection to our women on the front lines, including in the context of achieving vaccines for all. Excellencies, women living in poverty face an even higher risk of COVID-19 transmission and fatalities, loss of livelihood, and increased violence. Women are overrepresented in sectors which are traditionally underpaid, insecure, and lack basic social protections, such as family leave and paid sick leave. Furthermore, some women may be pushed out of the labor market permanently as unpaid care burdens increase due to school closures and the suspension of respite services. Countering the impact of COVID-19 on women who are living on the cusp of extreme poverty requires us to address gender norms in society head-on and close social protection gaps. To be sure, this is a tall order, but it is the only way that we will eliminate labor market segregation, gender pay gaps, and the distribution of unpaid care and domestic work. Interim social protection measures that would alleviate the impact of COVID-19 on women include direct income support to women, such as direct cash transfers, expanded unemployment benefits, and expanded family and child benefits for vulnerable women and their families. Stimulus funding for women entrepreneurs and business owners, and equal access to affordable, quality childcare services to enable women to remain in the workforce. It is essential that we safeguard women's economic independence if we are to end gender-based violence. During the COVID-19 pandemic, public health containment measures have had the inadvertent effect of isolating those who are most at risk. Concerns regarding healthcare and family finances, combined with an increased burden of unpaid care, contributing to what has been dubbed a shadow pandemic. 1 in 3 women have experienced physical or sexual violence in their lifetime, with the figure increasing for women living in conflict settings. We must prioritize essential services, data collection, legislative change, and the end of impunity for perpetrators. Next, we must ensure that 11 million girls at risk of being left behind return to the classroom as soon as possible. We know that girls are safer when they are in school. Moreover, we need to ensure that girls are equipped with the skills required to succeed in a rapidly changing world. We need to bridge the gender digital divide, which relatively stands at 17% globally. To this end, I will convene a high-level thematic debate on digital cooperation and connectivity to explore whole-of-society approaches to end the digital divide, with a segment dedicated to the dynamics of women and girls. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, this decade of action to implement the Sustainable Development Goals is our final chance to course correct if we are to achieve the targets of SDG 5, gender equality. In October, I established the Advisory Group on Gender Equality to mainstream the issue throughout the work of the General Assembly. I have amplified these conversations while meeting with the group of Friends of Gender Parity and when speaking to members of my gender-balanced cabinet. Until we truly become generation equality, we must repeat this simple fact. Every woman, everywhere, is entitled to the full enjoyment of her fundamental human rights. I thank you for your time and your commitment to creating a more equal, just, safer world, just as the penholders of the Charter of the United Nations envisaged 75 years ago. I also thank the Minister for convening this meeting, and I wish all the success to the panelists and the participants of the meeting. And greetings from New York to Turkey.
Thank you so much, Excellency, for these really exceptionally important insights and also your continuing dedication to push for women and girls' rights. And you've highlighted, together with the welcoming remarks of Her Excellency the Minister, that our discussion today and in this side event, we are indeed keeping a focus on the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly important with 2030 just around the corner, being the cutoff date for addressing all forms of inequality, discrimination, and violence that different women and girls across the world face, conditions that now have been exacerbated by COVID-19, and we are at risk of losing the gains. We also, through this side event, have the opportunity to share good practices and lessons learned, focusing on how we can make better value and use of the role of women in addressing the pandemic, particularly those who are on the front lines, who are providing those essential health and social services. They are critical for response and also for the recovery from the pandemic. Now we turn to our panelists, and it is a great honor and pleasure for me to introduce Her Excellency Dr. Amal Hamad, the Minister of Women's Affairs of the State of Palestine. Dr. Hamad is a seasoned politician and feminist, holding a PhD in educational psychology. She is the chairwoman of the General Union of Palestinian Women for the Southern Governorates since 2007, and has previously served as the director of the Southern branch of the Union. She is a long-standing activist in the Palestinian women's movement, and it's a pleasure now to give you the floor, Dr. Hamad.
Thank you. Greeting to Her Excellency Minister of Family, Labor and Social Services at the Republic of Turkish, Mr. Zahra Zomorot, and gratitude for her invitation to this side event. Women in Palestine still face lots of obstacles since the Palestinian Nakba until now, which are derived from the virulent Israeli violation in terms of wars, obligatory immigration, siege, demolition, opposing the international treaties and UN Security Council resolutions, and lately the widespread of COVID-19 pandemics. Palestinian women have learned how to give psychological and emotional support to their children who suffer from occupation violence and attacks by the extremist shelters. Ladies and gentlemen, more than 1/10 of the families in Palestine are headed by women. Enrollment rate by females in higher education institutions stands at 61%. Women percentage at the labor market during the pandemic is 16%. Statistics show high unemployment rate and poverty among women, while 27% of women enterprises were stopped from operating, and the gross domestic product was decreased by 4%. Through the different decades, the Palestinian women have preserved the art of embroidery, the cultural songs, and the traditional dishes, in addition to the fact that they have shined in other fields where we saw Palestinian women, writers, doctors, nurses, members in the Legislative Council, ministers, ambassadors, lawyers, artists, and activities in the humanitarian field. Women diplomats rate is 11%, 18% civil judges, 30% member in municipalities and local councils, 26% in the coming local elections by minimum, and low representation rate in highly emergency committees. The recent pandemic has increased burdens and duties on women, but they were creative in many other sectors, such as following up on distance learning, securing other secure sources of income to their families through enrolling in economical initiatives on the local level or through the online marketing, taking care on children and elders at shelters, taking care of ill people, and responding to emergency calls through the security forces, and securing access to internet networks. The policies taken by Palestinian government during the pandemic focus on the following. First, agreement between government, private sector, and unions secure of fitness of employees, salaries, and securing jobs, and likely increasing the minimum wage rate. Second, compensating women workers who lost their jobs through a series of procedures. Three, prevention and protection series for women subjected to violence, where the government endorsed 14 procedures to secure them with protection during the quarantine and closure time, securing the opening of shelters, legal services, litigation by Sharia, and official judges, centralization of premises, social and psychological support, and following up on the complaints received by citizens. Fourth, the government has recently adopted a set of recommendations following to the discussed on gender responsive policy study as following: forming a national committee to review the economic policies from a gender perspective, customizing economical project, in addition to determining procedure to assure the responsiveness of policies to gender issues before ratify them. 5, the inclusive of services at all areas through the establishment of 300 support committees to support women and meeting their needs. 6, development of responsive plan to address the pandemic efforts. Finally, we look forward for an effective and participatory role with your respectful ministry to develop the Palestinian women's business and assuring its benefit from Jenin Industrial City that your country will sponsor according to the late agreement, activating the memorandum of understanding between us that focus on exchanging experience, economic empowerment, and opening an external market for the product of mechanism for monitoring violence cases. Institutionalization of relation among all acting partners in the field of gender equality according to the best practice. Thank you for your time and thanks for listening.
Shukran, Maali al-Wazira. Thank you so much for sharing how the state of Palestine is navigating the pandemic in a very complex political context and speaking to the resilience of women and girls in the face of extreme challenges. We now turn to our next esteemed speaker, Ms. Augustina Ernie, Deputy Minister of Women Empowerment and Child Protection of the Republic of Indonesia, who has been serving in this capacity since 2018. She began her career as an academic in the University of Bengkulu, where she became chair of the Center of Gender Studies. She serves as the Indonesian focal point in regional groups such as the ASEAN Committee on Women and APEC Policy Partnership on Women and the Economy. Deputy Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you, the moderator. Your Excellency, Mrs. Sumurut Selu, Minister of Family, Labor and Social Services, Republic of Turkey. Your Excellency, Mr. Volkan Bozkır, President of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Your Excellency, Ms. Amal Hamad, Minister of Women's Affairs of Palestine, distinguished speaker, delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to begin by expressing my sincere appreciation of the government of Turkey for hosting this virtual side event in the margin of CSW 65. As we move from 2020, tremendous lessons have been learned from unprecedented global pandemics, which has placed significant strain to the achievement made in the previous decades, particularly in gender equality, women empowerment, and elimination of all forms of violence against women and children. The severe socio-economic process and adduced challenges derived from the outbreak make women and girls even more vulnerable. As data show, a global surge of violence against women and children. Allow me to highlight a number of points in Indonesian context. In the midst of the COVID-19 outbreak, we continue to improve our disaster management strategy while securing the right of women and girls in the protection against GBV in humanitarian situations by promoting gender-sensitive procedure. The government established a flagship program, we call it Berjarak, which means together we protect our family. This is a collaborative national effort where the government works with CSO, private sector, religious institutions, academia, and other professional organizations and relevant stakeholders to ensure that women and children are protected against COVID-19. As a public educational awareness raising, Berjarak has published a number of notable information and educational electronic and printed leaflet for women and children's protection. As the number of family cluster cases rose last year, we have also published family health protocol, calling for women to play active role with their family unit in prevention and handling of COVID-19 transmission. through social distancing, regular masking, and hand washing. Responding to the soared number of violence against women, Indonesia strives to eliminate violence against women and children by teaming up the relevant stakeholders and development partners, both at local and national level. We map out a comprehensive strategy by taking into account a number of aspects, which are, first, prevention, including regulation and policy that focus on victim rehabilitation and ensuring law enforcement officers to adopt gender-responsive approaches. Second, institutional capacity building, while simultaneously involving related stakeholders and civil society. And the third, service provision by setting up supporting systems that are qualified, efficient, accessible, comprehensive, and integrated. And fourth, empower to ensure survivor independence by providing them with skill and based knowledge. For COVID-19 integrated services response in violence against women and child cases, service centers are expected to adopt the following protocol. First protocol is child care protocol for non-symptomatic, suspected, or COVID-19 positive children, and children with parents or caregiver or guardians that suspected of or died due to COVID-19. Second protocol is protocol to handling child victim of violence in COVID-19 pandemic situation. And the third protocol is protocol for handling cases of gender-based violence, human trafficking, and Indonesian women migrants workers during COVID-19 pandemic. Furthermore, we have also launched a counseling service named Sejiwa to provide psychological assistance responding to the increasing number of psychological pressure amidst COVID-19, including for women and children. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we are aware that COVID-19 not only have an impact on health, but also in the economic situation. Let me highlight some of this action made by Indonesia to respond in the economic damage due to COVID-19. We know that data remain a key component in policy formulation and program intervention. Thus, the government highly encourages availability of COVID-19 disaggregated data by sex and age group to accelerate the targeted handling of COVID-19. To illustrate the distribution of national stimulus scheme, we call it program Harapan or Family Hope program, and also cash transfer program really heavily on data availability. In addition, we also strengthen our national coordination and program synchronization within related ministry for better implementation to protect women and children during the pandemic. We have signing joint degree of 5 minister and head of institution, and those institutions are Ministry for Women Empowerment and Child Protection, Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Village Development and Disadvantaged Region and Transmigration, Ministry for Social Affairs, and head of the National Family Planning Coordinating Agency. To build back economy, the government has pledged over 600 trillion rupiah in 2020 through the program Pemulihan Ekonomi, Economic Recovery Program, where 123 trillion is allocated for the micro, small enterprises. Other stimulant is channeled through government assistance for micro enterprises, where women made up the majority of the group. The assistance is distributed in form of one-time cash bank transfer, amounting to 2.4 million rupiah per person. To assist other layer of community, the government also provides wage subsidy for those receiving under 5 million rupiah, in which 600,000 rupiah is distributed for 4 months. We also remain committed to the capacity enhancement and creation of employment for women entrepreneurs during the pandemic, as seen through the ongoing series of webinars for women SMEs, particularly in IT access, online-based business, including e-market platform, digital economy, and online marketing. We're working with related partners. We encourage business sustainability for women SMEs by producing PPE while bidding continuous data collection from local institutions and regional agencies to ensure that access to recovery assistance. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, women and girls represent half of the world population, and it is our obligation to ensure that our duty as government, member of the community, and the individual will contribute to their safety and well-being, particularly in the trying times. We are confident that this conference will invigorate every member state in making real investment for women and girl children, both individually and or under the global cooperation framework. Thus, if the God's willing, our work and effort will bring forth virtue and benefit for all people around the world. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Minister, for sharing the experiences from the Republic of Indonesia. And before we proceed with our program, just to announce that His Excellency, the President of the General Assembly, will need to leave us shortly. So we want to use this opportunity to have a photo of the group. So kindly asking all of the panelists, all the speakers to turn on their cameras so that we can take the photo. So just asking all who haven't got their photos or their videos on to kindly turn on your videos. Onur Bey, I will ask you to please assist from the other side to make sure that all the speakers. Are we going to be able to? Okay, so, all right, thank you very much. And we shall now proceed. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Ms. Fatma Aksal, the chair of the Parliamentary Commission on Equal Opportunities in Turkey. And Ms. Aksal has a degree in economics and also a doctorate in economics. She brings to this important parliamentary role very long experience in the areas of business development and employment policies. Ms. Aksal, you've also joined us in consultations in parts of the region in preparation for the Commission on the Status of Women. We really look forward to your intervention. The floor is yours. Fatma Hanum, you need to unmute the mic.
Sorry. Sayın Bakanım, dear ministers, distinguished members of UN, distinguished members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to participate the 65th session of CSW. Before I start my speech, I send my well wishes to all who are fighting with COVID-19. Dear participants, in order to build a strong society and increase the welfare and well-being of all, we need strong women. A woman can change her family, her society, and eventually all world. Even though the Turkish woman got the right to vote and be elected in 1934, way before the women of many developed countries, the number of women in the parliament remained very low for a long time. With the encouragement of our president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, there has been a remarkable increase in the rate of female participation in politics in recent years. The rate of female parliamentarians has increased from 4.4% in 2000 to 17.5% today. In 2002, our constitution has been amended to empower women. In order to support working women and provide a balanced work and family life, important regulations have been made in the labor law, civil servants law, and other relevant legislation. Working mothers were provided with convenience, extended maternity leaves, longer breastfeeding periods, flexible working hours, and early retirement rights. These practices started to pay off. Today, about 40% of those working in public sector are women. According to Ministry of Foreign Affairs data, while the rate of women ambassadors was 9.5% in 2007, this rate rose to 25% in 2020. The female labor force participation rate, which was about 27% in 2002, rose to 25% in 2020. In order to prevent violence against women, the law 6284 on the protection of family and prevention of violence against women was adopted by the Parliament in 2002. Recently, a commission to investigate the increasing incidence of violence against women was established in the Turkish Parliament. During COVID-19 pandemic, flexible working methods such as working from home and rotational working have been adopted. In addition, has been deemed to appropriate to meet the annual leave requests of female employees who have children in preschool and primary education, and to give an excuse leave to those who do not have the right to annual leave. In the 11th Development Plan, which was designed between the years 2019 and 2023, in which our Commission took on competencies in the labor market and their more intense participation in business life, with regulation that improve the flexibility of labor market, increase child care services, education opportunities, and employment-oriented policies. I would like to express my gratitude for the organization of this significant event. We will fulfill the responsibility that falls on our shoulders. I would like to greet each one of you with respect. I thank you for your contribution today, creating a better life for women and girls. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Axel. Our next speaker is Ms. Claudia Luciani, Director of the Directorate of Human Dignity, Equality and Governance at the Council of Europe, a key partner in the region on gender equality and women's empowerment. Ms. Luciani joined the Council of Europe in 1990, and since 2018 in her present role, she has focused the efforts of her directorate on the implementation of Council of Europe conventions for eliminating violence and trafficking. With a strong focus on governance, support to institutions, election assistance, and civil society engagement, Ms. Luciani organizes the annual Forum for Democracy. Ms. Luciani, it's a pleasure to listen to you now, and the floor is yours. Claudia, you're still muted. You need to unmute your microphone. You're trying, okay. It should be on the bottom left of your screen. There you are. I cannot hear you still. I don't know if other colleagues can hear.
No, I cannot hear her.
Okay, Claudia, if you'll allow, I will ask the technical team to reach out to you. I'll move on to the next speaker and then come back to you, if that's okay. All right, great. So we'll have the opportunity to listen to Claudia, and I'll ask the technical team online, please, to support. Okay, so now apologies. Now we will turn to our next speaker, Ms. Nuket Kushukel Azerbeji, Chair of the Board of Directors of Guven Hospital. She brings with her very long experience in the healthcare industry and strong business development skills, as well as management and leadership skills from the Harvard Business School. In addition to membership in the Turkish Industrialists and Businessmen's Association, TÜSİAD, she's also a member of Accredited Hospitals Association, Private Hospitals and Health Organizations Associations, Ankara Health Institutions Associations, Bilkent Alumni Association, as well as many others, which we don't have time to go into. But it's great to have you with us here today. And it's my honor to hand now the floor over to you to speak to the topic of our side event today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chairwoman, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, Sayın Bakanım. Please allow me to extend my sincere gratitude to be addressing on this very timely and very important side event. The situation of women in a country is the main indicator of its development. It is not possible to be a strong, developed, and democratic country by excluding half of the population from the game. Gender equality has a multiplier effect across all development areas. COVID-19 has impacted the lives of millions across the globe. Men and women are affected differently by the crisis, epidemics, and natural disasters. Research shows that women are more negatively affected than the men during and after such crises, unfortunately. This also applies to the COVID-19 pandemic. The impact of pandemic has been disproportionate against women and girls. Many women lost their jobs due to their overrepresentation in hardest hit sectors and in the informal economy. Micro, small, and medium-sized women-owned businesses face significant challenges to survive and grow. Due to increase in the time spent at home, there's a growth in unpaid domestic and care work at home for women and girls. In addition, women and girls are being forced to fight a new shadow pandemic, that is, an increasing rate of domestic violence. Domestic violence, unfortunately, is increasing by at least 20% around the world. More and more women are being abused, and the severity of violence is increasing. Well, against this background, UN Women Turkey Office, the Turkish Industry and Business Association, and the Turkish Enterprise and Business Confederation collaborated on a research to gain insight into the potential effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the private sector from the gender perspective and contribute to the development of policies to safeguard gender equality. The survey has very interesting outcomes. It was conducted between March-June 2020 and published in November 2020. Representatives of 339 firms participated in the survey. The main outcomes are as follows. There is a considerable difference in challenges reported by female and male employees. Women face more difficulty, especially in terms of work-life balance and rising trend of violence. And the second, 76% of the enterprises have reportedly taken special measures to reduce the stress of their employees and improve their overall well-being since the restrictions imposed during COVID-19, whereas only 26% of them have taken measures specifically for female employees. The results of the survey are expected to feed into policies for developing gender-sensitive short and long-term actions for companies as part of their resilience-building strategies. It is not possible to foster a good working environment unless specific measures are adopted against the challenges faced by women in the process. As considerable number of enterprises are adopting remote working from home permanent, enterprises should revise their remote flexible working arrangements within the framework of current gender norms. More flexible working hours should be offered as part of remote working, or men should be encouraged to equally share unpaid care burden with their spouses. The public sector has major responsibilities to combat inequality in domestic and care work. As this requires a long-term response, The measures to be recommended should not be limited to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the private and the public sector should be hand in hand tackling these problems. Last but not least, violence against women, which is a result of the failure of ensure gender equality and exacerbates this equality at the same time, appears to be one of the most urgent problems waiting for a solution. Well, Your Excellencies, Ms. Minister, our responsibility is high. We will be working all together, hand in hand, and we are going to ensure that the women are going to be represented as they deserve in all of our societies. Ms. Chairwoman, I am a very proud representative of a 1,600 people health organization. 80% of the whole administration unit are from women. So thank you very much for this opportunity again. And last note to Mrs. Amal Hamed. Al-Quds has been my home for 2 years. Ehlen ve sehlen. Thank you.
Thank you. Nukat Hanım, just to say that the experience and the partnership that we have with private sector in Turkey and the commitment of private sector companies in Turkey is really a model that we are making sure is being publicized across the offices of UN Women worldwide. We're seeing a lot of our offices wanting to engage, to learn from this kind of leadership role that you've taken. So thank you very much for sharing that experience. And I believe, Claudia, we have you with us now. So it's my pleasure to invite you to take the floor, and you will have the final speaking slot in this side event today. Over to you, Claudia.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay,
Perfect.
good. On my phone, so I'm sorry. So warm greetings to all from Strasbourg. It's indeed a pleasure to be with you and to have listened to such an inspiring panel of so different and really very valuable experiences. I will just try to give the Council of Europe contribution to the discussion. And we're very excited because today the Committee of Ministers has just adopted the Declaration on Equal Pay and Opportunities for Women and Men. Just to say that organizations, of course, are also trying, like states, to make their contribution. So if you allow me some remarks. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic is having indeed an impact on many women and girls in a number of ways. It has been said. The most visible one is possibly the economic impact, and it is a very serious one. It has been emphasized by previous speakers. Indeed, the numbers have been given by the President of the UN General Assembly. Women are overrepresented in the sectors providing essential services, 70%. However, during the first wave of pandemic, the employment for women dropped by 2.2 million only in the European Union area. And as we know, women working in retail, accommodation, residential care, domestic work, who make up the bulk of workforce in these professions, have had really severe job losses. And across the world, not just in Europe, they hold the most precarious forms of employment and lower pays. And teleworking has also heightened the work-life balance conflicts that that are taking a very important toll and increasing the share of unpaid work. But there is another clear impact of the pandemic, and that is on women's safety, as it has also been emphasized by most speakers. Last year saw a global increase in domestic violence, whilst the number of prosecutions has collapsed. As noted by the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Ms. Maria Pecinovic-Buric, lockdowns and the difficulty to access specialist support services aimed at protecting women from violence have put their lives and integrity at high risk. Mobility restrictions have also provoked an increase in online violence in different forms, such as sexting, stalking, deepfake imagery, revenge porn, and non-consensual dissemination of private images, among others. The pandemic has indeed put a spotlight on a number of issues that were already problematic, as we know, such as lack of funding for measures to protect and support women and girls. Therefore, it is of the utmost importance that in these difficult times, states ensure the provision of support services for the protection of women and do not deviate resources allocated for this purpose. And I must say, we've heard some tremendous examples of how some states are doing just that. The Council of Europe Istanbul Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence offers a toolkit for a holistic response to all forms of violence against women, before, during, and after a pandemic. In view of the increasing number of reported cases of violence, the Committee of the Parties to the Istanbul Convention has called upon state parties to uphold the Convention principles and requirements to guarantee women's safety. Some states have shown creative thinking and have brought about innovative solutions. Facilitating online support to victims, SMS helplines, or online applications for restraining orders are among the measures that some countries have introduced. These efforts that represent safeguards for many women victims of violence must be praised, and states must be encouraged to follow these steps. However, the pandemic has shed a new light on the need for a strong gender equality perspective in all policies, with adequate resources in order to mitigate the gendered impact of the crisis. From this point of view, the post-COVID crisis can be an opportunity to build more equal, inclusive, and resilient economies and societies. Let me highlight just a few points. First, all gender equality needs must be integrated into crisis and post-crisis response measures and recovery plans. In this respect, it is essential that women have access to and participate in decision-making about recovery plans. We've heard a lot of plans, but I haven't heard in detail how much women and their representatives and associations have been actually involved and have been sitting at the table in making those decisions. This is very important. It is also important to ensure that gender equality remains a policy priority, and it is mainstreamed in other policies areas through the use of gender mainstreaming methods and tools, as well as through developing and enhancing synergies among ministries and government bodies. Governments should implement measures to support the reconciliation of paid work with family care responsibilities for both women and men, and invest in gender-responsive social protection and care infrastructure to work in a long-term and inclusive way. Finally, services for women who experience violence during the COVID-19 crisis must be provided by ensuring sufficient long-term financial support to specialist women's organizations to meet the increased demand for essential services and emergency shelter. As indicated before, this has persisted to be one of the most problematic aspects identified by Agravio, the monitoring instrument of the Convention. But moving towards substantive gender equality also requires a change in the roles of both women and men, including equal sharing of household and care responsibilities, strong commitment to real and effective gender equality at all levels and in all areas, and the elimination of sexism and gender stereotypes will no doubt benefit future generations and society as a whole. The Istanbul Convention provides the necessary framework, we believe, for states to adopt effective measures that aim at countering violence against women. We know from the monitoring of the Convention that these measures are bearing fruit. More and more specialist support services are made available to women and girls. Changes to criminal law lead to higher rates of prosecution, and the awareness of violence against women as a structural phenomenon is rising. So the Convention is indeed having a positive impact in all the state parties. It is a point of pride for me to recall that Turkey was the country where this Convention was open for signature, and Turkey was the first country to ratify the Convention. Furthermore, the Council of Europe is working in close cooperation with the Turkish Minister of Family, Labor and Social Services to facilitate the implementation of the Agravio recommendations in Turkey. by developing wide in-service training programs and materials for key professionals working with victims. This includes, for instance, training for workers providing psychosocial support to victims, judicial officers supporting women through legal proceedings, and for other authorities, including at regional level. This is, I want to highlight, a perfect example of the logic that guides our organization in working with our member states, based on a combination of standard setting, monitoring, and cooperation. In a year which marks the 10th anniversary of the opening for signature of the Istanbul Convention, it is very important that all states parties reaffirm their commitment to the Convention and its objectives. As you know, all states can become parties to the Istanbul Convention, not just the Council of Europe member states. Tunisia, for instance, has requested and obtained to be invited to accede to the Istanbul Convention. Let me conclude by saying that global problems not only require global response, but they can also push individual states to make use of existing international instruments to assist them, convinced as we are that the provision of these instruments can inspire normative and policy changes in all regions of the world for the benefit of all women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claudia, for those important words that you've shared with us. I believe now we've come towards the end of our side event today, and I just wanted to perhaps summarize some of the key points that resonated from the discussions. One of the framing sentiments that were at the opening of this meeting was this urgency of not losing the gains that have been made in women's rights. And that this is a collective concern of all of those represented here today. And not only the emphasis of not losing the gains, but the urgent need to accelerate action so that we proceed further forward. If we celebrated 25 years since Beijing last year, we now only have 9 years in which to make it to the ambitious Sustainable Development Goals. Key issues that have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. I think all speakers talked about the increasing prevalence of violence against women and girls, and that we need to address this so-called shadow pandemic. I think you also heard from our latest speaker, from Claudia, how important it is to look at also the manifestation of this phenomenon, not only in the domestic or in the public sphere as we are used to it, but also online, and that we need strategies to address it. There's also within the economic sphere, growing concerns about poverty and how many women are at the cusp of really paying the price for the COVID-19 crisis, especially as we are facing a global recession. We know that it's actually women-dominated sectors that have been most heavily affected by the COVID-19 pandemic economic impact. They have suffered the job loss, the income loss. They are at risk of precarious working conditions. They are working in the informal sector. They're predominantly represented in that sector. And we need to make sure that we address all of these issues, because otherwise we risk making any further progress in terms of increasing women's representation in political and public life. We already have an issue. I think you spoke about it, Claudia, in terms of the representation of women leaders in these task forces that are working on the COVID-19 response. At the beginning of the pandemic, or a few months ago, it was estimated that women's representation stands only at 3.5% in those task forces, which is really very telling. I think these numbers are growing. We are hoping to have updated statistics, but we're nowhere near parity. We're nowhere near the 50%. So in terms of what should be done, we've heard from all of you in terms of what are the key actions, particularly if we reflect on the words of Her Excellency, the Minister, in terms of the aspirations for having a more equal, more inclusive, and more sustainable world. You spoke about enabling policy and legal frameworks, whether it is talking about eliminating violence against women or looking at creating an enabling environment for women's economic or political participation. The importance of making sure that services are provided despite the circumstances, that there are essential services that are speaking to the heart of the issues that we spoke about today that must continue even in the conditions of lockdown. We must look at social protection schemes. I think we heard about this in terms of the very concrete measures that have been taken in Turkey, in Indonesia, in Palestine, that are really protecting the conditions for women, so that we're protecting them from violence, we're protecting them from the economic harsh conditions and poverty. We also heard about the importance of investment and data. We need to have data to measure the level of the problems, and also to see if the actions that are being taken are having an impact, if they are improving the situation of women and girls. But very importantly, we also need to look at financing and investment. So there has been an emphasis on investment in service infrastructure, not just care infrastructure, but infrastructure that is speaking to the heart of the issues that we have prioritized. And finally, I would just like to say that what we've heard from you are what I have taken from this are 3 Ps. One is prevention, that we need to really look at prevention as a key area for work, whether we're talking about preventing the shadow pandemic of violence against women, or we're preventing disaster. Hazards are natural, they occur, but they become a full-blown disaster because we haven't put preventative measures in place. So we can learn from the COVID-19 pandemic and look at how we can put women in leadership positions to lead in these prevention efforts. We also need to have preparedness. We've learned lessons from this crisis, from this pandemic. How are we making sure that this informs our preparedness for things that we cannot plan for in the future? And finally, and perhaps most importantly, is partnerships. We've heard this from the intervention from Palestine. So when we're talking about partnerships across borders between countries to work together to tackle common problems, we've also heard about it as partnership between private sector and the public sector. And I would put to you that it goes far beyond. We've heard it from Claudia as well, and you're going to hear it from UN Women, where we're really looking at expanding partnership across multiple stakeholders. And with this, I call on all of you to join us also through the Generation Equality Initiative, which is a multi-stakeholder initiative that is aiming to accelerate action towards the aspirations of the Sustainable Development Goals, including SDG 5. And these multi-stakeholder partnerships are in the form of concrete actions that bring together government, private sector, civil society organizations, including youth organizations and international organizations, to put our efforts all together, and all of the lessons learned and all of the insights. I want to thank again the government of Turkey and Her Excellency the Minister for hosting this event. It has been indeed a really rich discussion, and I look forward to our continuing our conversation throughout the Commission on the Status of Women this year. We have to do it in the virtual realm, but hopefully next year, let's make 2022 a year where we meet again face to face. Thank you all very much, and wishing you a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.